Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. It's a one-man mailbag day. I'm Heath Cummings, your host, and I will be answering your Dynasty questions for at least the next half hour. If you're watching live on YouTube, thank you for being here. There will be time at the end of the show, I'll say this multiple times, for your questions on YouTube. I've also got some emails here that I want to read. I've got some tweets that we need to go through. So again, about a half hour of your questions. Feel free to leave your questions in the chat on YouTube. If you're watching on Twitter, you've got to come over here to YouTube to ask the questions so that I can answer them, because I can't see what you're asking me on Twitter right now. We're going to start right away with an idea that I love. Well, first, I want to start by saying thank you, CJ. I love doing Dynasty. So this is my favorite show, I guess shows now, of the week, right? And I appreciate you guys that are here in the chat. David was trying to basically rebuild his team, but I'm not sure that I would say go into rebuild mode. He made 5 trades since the end of the season, gave up Kyler Murray, the 105, Isaiah Pacheco, Kenneth Walker, Marshawn Lloyd, the 205, 311, Jacoby Myers, Dontavian Wicks. Again, that's Kyler, Pacheco, Walker, Lloyd, Myers, Wicks, 105, 205, and 311. This is across 5 different trades, but he wanted a grade for all of them. And I just went to the trade chart, and that comes out as a value of 88.6 on my trade chart. Again, you can go to Sportsline and you can get my 1QB and Superflex trade chart. Highly recommend you do that. 88.6. He received Drake May, Braylon Allen, Jalen McMillan, Jake Ferguson, Luke Schoonmaker, Tucker Kraft, Kayshon Boutte, the 108, 111, 211, and a 2026 third. So again, that's May, Allen, McMillan, Ferguson, Schoonmaker, Kraft, and Boutte. I probably shouldn't say just Allen when I'm talking about Braylon Allen, because it's a fantasy football show and everybody's going to think it's Josh Allen and think he crushed these trades. And 4 picks, 108, 111, 211, and a 2026 third. What you received, David, comes out on the most recent version of my trade chart as an 83.2. So you lose this trade, these 5 trades, by about 5% on the trade chart. I do think you get obviously younger at QB going from Kyler to Drake May. You're getting younger, acquiring Braylon Allen and Jalen McMillan. And McMillan's one guy in particular who may go up in terms of wide receiver rankings and in terms of my trade chart over the offseason for sure, but maybe even when we get to the February update. I'm seeing more and more talk about Chris Godwin's ankle injury. I think I said on a show last week with Dave, or maybe with Jamie earlier this week, that I am really not that concerned about Chris Godwin in 2025. I just kind of assumed it was an ankle injury. He's going to be fine by the start of next year. I've seen some things over the last couple of days talking about the mechanisms of Godwin's injury and the actual broken bone. And there does seem to be some legitimate concern that he may not be 100% next year. And I think there's definitely concern that he's not on Tampa Bay next year. And if that happens, then Jalen McMillan to the moon. And David, you win all these 5 trades. The other thing that we don't know for sure is how is the new coaching staff going to view the split between Breece Hall and Braylon Allen. I think that's another opportunity for a big win there. And Kayshon Boutte is one of my favorite young players to stash on Dynasty rosters. I think I had a Twitter question about that. So the answer to your question, Dave, is probably a C- as of the January trade chart. But I would say that it's has a potential to turn into a solid B. Sam sent in a screenshot of his first Dynasty team and asked me to evaluate it. I thought this would be a fun way to talk about some players in Dynasty. And wow, oh wow, his quarterback room. Lamar Jackson, Jayden Daniels, Deshaun Watson, Tyler Huntley, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Obviously, this is a super flex league, and you have 2 of my top 5 quarterbacks in Dynasty. So you're doing a fantastic job. A+ at the quarterback position. Could use some depth. because I'm not sure any of those other three guys are ever going to start a game in the NFL again. Yes, I'm including Deshaun Watson in that statement. At running back, Sam has Devon Achane, Chase Brown, David Montgomery, Aaron Jones, Blake Corum, and Antonio Gibson. Again, a very, very good running back room. I think you've got two of my top 10 running backs, and David Montgomery and Aaron Jones both have the ability to be really like excellent league-winning flexes. I'll have to give you a solid A at the running back position as well. And this is not, I know the next question when you hear these names, is this an 8-team league? No, he has the 12th pick. He won the league in year one. And so this is a 12-team league. At wide receiver, you have Puka Nacua, Deebo Samuel, Devontae Adams, Jalen Polk, Juju Smith-Schuster, Alan Lazard, Noah Brown, Darius Slayton, Greg Dortch, and Adam Thielen. So this is where we see that the problem is with Sam's team. Even though he won the league, it wasn't a problem last year. But real questions about wide receiver 2, Deebo Samuel, and wide receiver 3, Devontae Adams. If I was looking like the first thing that I would do with this roster would be to see if I could move Montgomery and or Jones for a wide receiver to upgrade on wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3. Might even consider, because you won the league last year, because you're a true contender, adding some of the 2025 picks. He has his first, second, third, and fourth. Again, that's all the 12th pick in the round. See if you can add one of those 2025 picks to one of those running backs or to Deebo or Adams and turn that into a better, younger wide receiver. At tight end, Sam has Mark Andrews, Jatavian Sanders, and Jelani Woods. Would not hesitate to add a tight end from this class. The more I look at it, the more I get excited about running back and tight end in the 2025 rookie class. The more I get a little bit discouraged about quarterback and wide receiver. So I'm not sure you're getting a lot of wide receiver help this year in the draft, Sam, which is one of the reasons I'd be willing to use those picks to make your team better as opposed to counting on the draft. But overall, you won year one. You look very good moving forward. Great job, Sam. Ted sent in an email about an orphan. This is one of the ones that Adam tried to read on the podcast yesterday, and I stopped him. So sorry, Ted. I'm sure you were so excited to hear it read yesterday. Well, you get to hear it read today. I just picked up an Orphan Dynasty team. I've been playing fantasy for over 20 years. This is my first Dynasty team. I thought maybe you could talk a little about when to go for it and when to rebuild. I'm putting my team here if you want to use that as an example. I'm not sure if this is go for it worthy. I also just got offered a trade, the 103 for the 108 and next year's first. Do I take it? So I would say, first off, I really don't love trading next year's first. And I'm pretty much like I have to win the deal by a bunch to trade next year's first if I'm not sure that I'm a contender. So let's take a look at this super flex roster that Ted has. He has Lamar Jackson, Bo Nix, Aaron Rodgers, and Drew Lock at quarterback. That's Lamar, Nix, Rodgers, and Lock. Yeah, that could be a contending quarterback room. At running back, he has Breece Hall, Brian Robinson, Chuba, Javonte, and Marshawn Lloyd. I think if you add a running back in the draft year, that could be a good enough running back room as well. Wide receiver, again, we're running into a lot of wide receiver problems looking at these rosters today. Cortland Sutton, Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy, and A.D. Mitchell. That's a C- at best. That might be a D wide receiver room. And then David Njoku, Theo Johnson, and Chigo Okonkwo. I think looking at this team, I would be trying to see if I could improve the wide receiver room. In fact, like if I was trading 103 for the 108, can I get, instead of a next year's first, a starting wide receiver? I wouldn't move to immediate tank or rebuild. I'd want to see how does this season go. And when I get to the trade deadline, am I going to push in? Or is it time to rebuild? Because you look at it, and even if you're rebuilding, you're keeping Lamar and Bo Nix. You're keeping Devontae Smith. So there's a few pieces here that you would want to hold on. Maybe even Breece Hall, but I don't really like holding on to running backs through a rebuild. So I would make my off-season priority improving the wide receiver room. If I can do that without trading any 2026 picks, then I would see like Can I contend this year? Let's see if Lamar Jackson has another year like he did last year, and Breece Hall's actually a top 3 running back like we expected him to be, and you find a wide receiver 1, then this team might just turn into a contending roster. Thanks for the question, Ted. Scott, I'm not sure if he had a question. He had a therapy session. Adam almost read this one as well. Last year in his rookie draft, he traded Ladd McConkey, Marvin Mims, and a 2025 first for Rome Odunze and a second rounder. This fits perfectly with the question that we just got from Ted, because he basically traded up in the rookie draft from Ladd to get Rome and gave up a first round pick this year. He knew he was overpaying, but he wanted Caleb and Rome together. And guess what happened? The 2025 first turned into the 101, and the 2025 second turned into the 10th pick in round 2. So essentially, he traded Ladd McConkey, Marvin Mims, and Ashton Jeanty for Rome Odunze and a low-end second-round pick this year. Do I have any hope to come back from this? And the answer is yes, there's always hope. But this is a crushing defeat. And this is why I don't like to trade next year's first at this time of year, especially if it's somebody else's first that I don't have any control over. We got another question about the 101 because I just kind of assumed that it's Jeanty. This question comes in. Adam says, I have the 101 pick in a super flex / tight end premium league. I also have 111, 201, 205. In last year's rookie draft, I drafted both Drake May and JJ McCarthy in the first round. My other QB is Mahomes. I have Puka, McConkey, Flowers, and Waddle at wide receivers. Running back and tight end is a little bit weaker. The question is, what direction should I go at the 101? Looking at Jeanty, but drafting a running back with 101 sounds crazy in a super flex dynasty league. This is the year, Adam and everyone else, that it's not crazy. And what the factors that go into that are the fact that we've got a truly elite running back that I think most people think they're not only going to be drafted in round 1, maybe in the first half of round 1, and we have a very weak quarterback and wide receiver class. And as you just described your team, Adam, you have a great quarterback room, a very, very good wide receiver room, and a weak running back room. So this is an easy choice. Use that 101 on Jeanty. I probably am looking at a tight end at either 111 or 201 because you're a little weak at tight end, maybe both. And then I think that you've got a team that can contend this year as long as Ashton Jeanty does what we expect that he will. We had a question about Travis Hunter. Hearing a lot of talk about Dion possibly impacting what teams will draft his son, saying he may not want to play for historically bad organizations. What I'm not hearing is why wouldn't Travis Hunter and his agent tell teams to only draft him if they intend to play him primarily wide receiver? The top wide receiver makes $10 million more than the top corner. I don't really have a lot of thoughts on this other than it's great thought process, and that's exactly what Travis Hunter should do. And I really hope it's what happens, because if you don't play in an IDP league and he becomes a corner, then one of the most exciting rookies in fantasy football you may not be able to benefit from in fantasy football. The other thing I will say, because we've brought Travis Hunter up, and I just like to say this every time that we do, I am a commissioner of an IDP league, and I am going to do everything that I can to make sure that he receives points for the things he does on offense and the things he does on defense. And if that means that he becomes the best player in fantasy football because he's playing 75% of the snaps at both, then he should be, because he's playing 75% of the snaps at both. It probably will be less consequential than that. I think the one area where it could get out of whack is if he's mostly just a corner, and so you get to play him on defense, but he scores 6 receiving touchdowns and becomes the number 1 corner by a big range. But again, he's the most valuable corner in football. Should be the most valuable corner in fantasy football. Let's take a look at some of the questions from Twitter, because we did have quite a few of those today. Andrew says, Caleb Williams or Sam Darnold, Jordan Love or Sam Darnold, Drake May or Sam Darnold. Where do you rank Sam Darnold? And I think this is more of a 2025 question, because for Dynasty, he's way behind Caleb Williams, Jordan Love, and Drake May. And for redraft, the answer is I don't know, which is why he's way behind all of those guys, right? We don't know where Sam Darnold's going to play. We don't know if he's going to get a long-term deal, or because of his struggles at the end of the year, he's going to have another 1-year prove-it deal. Looking at my current Dynasty rankings, he comes in at QB 17, which is right behind Jared Goff. Just for reference, those other guys, Caleb Williams is my QB 7, Jordan Love is my QB 9, Drake May is my QB 12. If you told me that Sam Darnold signs a 3-year, $60 million deal with the Minnesota Vikings, then Darnold moves up to be a borderline top 12 quarterback, and I would expect him to be a top 12 quarterback next year. But there's lots of other places that he could go. I mean, what if he ends up in Las Vegas on the Raiders? I'm not going to be super excited about that. He might not be a top 24 dynasty quarterback at that point, especially if it's just a 1-year deal that Darnold gets. Right now, I would view him as a QB2. I would view him as one of those QB2s that you're not entirely sure is going to be starting next year or the year after. Rob has a question that he asked last year, and I think I gave him a bad answer if I remember right. I drafted Hendon Hooker as a backup QB in a super flex league in 2023. I was surprised when he was inactive for the Lions Commanders playoff game. That said, when do you think it's time to cut bait? We're rapidly approaching the time to cut bait, even in a super flex league. There's just not been any signs, really. I have Hendon Hooker currently as my QB 37. He'll be 27 years old when the next football season starts, maybe already. It's tough to hold a 27-year-old who doesn't really have any future path towards playing time. Deeper super flex leagues, I'm still holding, but I fully understand if you need to cut bait to make room to make a pick in the rookie draft. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll finish up the Twitter questions, and it looks like we've got several questions from the chat as well.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more.
It's Gareth Bale! Ronaldo! Wonderful goal!
On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Oh, we got one of those questions. A lot of times I get the questions and I'm excited. I'm like, oh yeah, I want to talk about that. I want to answer that on the show. And this is one where I just feel like I'm going to look like an idiot one way or the other. Robert on Twitter says, what's the highest 2025 rookie draft pick that you would give up for Christian McCaffrey? And so I think if you're talking about your own pick, then it's going to be something like 9. Because if I don't have it, like if I've got a team that just finished as the 6th best team this past year, I don't really want to give up the first round pick because I don't know that I'm really ready to compete. And McCaffrey is really at this point in his career a compete only player. I have him valued less than a 2025 first, which is just all 2025 first. So it's definitely below 7. 7, 8, 9 is probably like if you're a true contender that won the league and you just happen to have the 7th or the 8th pick, I'd be perfectly fine with giving that pick up for McCaffrey. But you just got to know, like, that could turn into nothing very early in this coming season. One more injury for McCaffrey, and I'm not sure he has any dynasty value at all. We got a question about year 2 of a rebuild. It says, last year was rough. I drafted J.J. McCarthy, Rome Odunze, and Jonathan Brooks. That Jonathan Brooks pick has hurt a lot of my dynasty teams. I feel that. This year I have 101 and 108. Not sure whether to take Genty or trade back. It's super flex. It's PPR. Again, he's got J.J. Darnold and Tua at QB, Puka, Rome Odunze, Xavier Worthy, Jamison Williams at wide receiver. The running backs are bad. The tight ends are bad. Again, I'm going to go take Ashton Genty. I think there's a very good chance that you have a QB1 and a QB2 out of J.J. Darnold and Tua. I think there's a very good chance that, Puka's a top 3 wide receiver. Rome Odunze, Xavier Worthy, Jamison Williams, those 3 could easily turn into a wide receiver 2, a wide receiver 3, and a flex. I want to go get my RB1 and see if maybe year 2 of total rebuild could be the end of the total rebuild. Let's start competing. Would you trade Jayden Daniels for Josh Allen? Wow. I like Josh Allen a lot more next year. I have Josh Allen ranked higher still in Dynasty. if there's a team that needs to go through a rebuild and they're willing to make that trade and you're actually contending, yes, I would rather have Josh Allen than Jayden Daniels in Dynasty. Go see if you can get that done. Last one from Twitter. Jeremy says, you have any good end of the year low roster waiver stashes before next year? Ones where we hope the situation changes value or can drop for the next rookie draft. Yeah, I mean, I think the running backs on the Raiders specifically, I'd like to see if Sincere McCormick maybe got dropped when he got hurt, is somebody that I wouldn't mind rostering. Will Shipley was a draft pick who got dropped by some people throughout the season, just popped in the playoffs, could easily be the RB2 behind an aging Saquon Barkley next year. Looking at the wide receiver position, the Eagles wide receivers, see if one of those young guys pops in the Super Bowl. I think that's probably about it at that position amongst low owns guys like Yoshivas. If he happens to be available, could become a good option. Any of the guys we were drafting in round 2 or early round 3 last year that you were excited about that got dropped, I would like to see if I could add one of those guys. Let's I'm just going to answer a sad question from the chat. It's not even been starred by Thomas. Thomas did a great job of starring 7 of your questions, but Rob made me sad, so I'm going to answer it. And yes, that picture is exactly how I feel. Thoughts on Jonathon Brooks? Looks like he won't play next year. Just leave an IR for now. Trade value has to be low. Yeah, I think in my most recent rankings, I was probably still too high on Jonathon Brooks. Maybe not. I've got him at RB27 right now. I don't think there's anything to do other than leave him in your IR spot unless you're a true contender and you want to see if you can get an old running back or an old wide receiver for him and just play it out that way. Guys I have in the same range are Aaron Jones, Najee Harris right now because of the uncertainty due to his free agency, Tony Pollard. So if you're a contender and you want to turn Jonathon Brooks into one of those guys, I think in terms of draft pick value, you're not getting anything better than a mid-second, which is not particularly exciting for a guy you just spent maybe a first-round pick on. Trent asks, what price is too high for Jayden Daniels? The guy in our Superflex League wants Ladd McConkey, 103, 2027 first, and an early 2025 second. Yeah, I don't know that I would do that if I had Jayden Daniels. I know Ladd McConkey was awesome, but there's not a pick here in this draft that I think is anywhere close to Jayden Daniels' value in a super flex league. And so if I have to give up an early 2025 second and Ladd McConkey and the 103, which is probably like a startup third round pick, the 2027 first, I don't like at all, but that's 2027. It's a long way. That's a lot of Jayden Daniels fantasy points between now and then. I don't think that price is too high, even if it feels like it. And those types of deals, like you start adding them up in the trade calculator. And it's why I always say, if you're doing a 2-for-1, you need to get at least 10% more value. If you're doing a 3-for-1, you need to get at least 20% more value. Because you can, Ladd and the 103 and the 2027 first and the 2025 second, those all added together are going to show maybe as more of that dynasty value than Jayden Daniels. But Jayden Daniels is so much better individually than any of them that I would go make that deal. Who would you prefer in a super flex league, Drake May or Caleb Williams? I'm sticking with Caleb Williams. I said earlier in the show, he's my QB7 right now. Drake May's my QB12. That's not a huge. The difference isn't as big in terms of value because there's kind of a tier there. But yeah, I would still pretty strongly prefer Caleb Williams over Drake May. Got a question. I finished with the number 1 seed lost in the first round. First off, set your playoffs up better. You shouldn't, if you got the number 1 seed, you shouldn't be playing in the first round. You need a bye. You should be in the semifinals. You should already have your money back. But anyway, I'm sorry that happened to you. Have the 102, 103, and 107. If nobody's willing to trade, would you view any of these as luxury picks? I want Hunter and Hampton, then take QB at 107. I think if you I would like to see if I could go get Ashton Genty. But if you can't make that happen with these picks, and Hunter does specify that he wants to go play at wide receiver, then I wouldn't have any problem with taking him with one of those picks. I think Hampton is the running back order. Like I saw today that Henderson of Ohio State may actually be a first-round pick. Any running backs we get in the first round are going to go higher than the running backs who don't, obviously. But yeah, if Hampton's your favorite running back in this class or second favorite running back in this class, taking him at the 103 is probably going to make sense. And then QB at 107 is just going to depend, obviously, on your league type. But I'm not real excited about any of the QBs in this draft. Can you explain to me an email startup draft for Dynasty? What's the timing length per pick? Because I can't see these rules before joining the league. I would definitely send a message to whoever's be the commissioner of that league, because the email draft can mean along a lot of different things. 4 to 8 hours, I think, a lot is pretty standard. But don't hesitate, especially before you choose to join a league, to ask the commissioner all of the questions. He needs somebody that's going to be committed to the league for a couple of years, so he doesn't have to do this replacement thing again. And one of the best ways to ensure that is if you understand the rules going in. CJ has a question. I'm the league champion and still contending. Biggest weakness is tight end. Do I use the 103 on Tyler Warren, ignoring other positions, or best available? I would be if I was going to use the 103 to upgrade my tight end position, I wouldn't do that by taking a rookie tight end, I don't think. I know Brock Bowers was just awesome, and Sam Laporta was really good as a rookie before taking a step back in year 2. And maybe one of these rookie tight ends will hit big, but it's not always even the guy who we think is the best in the class is the guy who's the best as a rookie. So, like, you're a true contender and you want to continue this run, I would be seeing, like, can I move back from 103 into lower in round 1 and go get a difference maker at tight end? Can I use the 103 to go get a Trey McBride? I'd be looking to use it in that manner, or to acquire a veteran starting tight end. It doesn't have to be an old one, but just somebody that you already know is good if you're trying to contend this year. I traded Jonathan Taylor and Jalen Waddle for the 103. Would you trade Bucky for the 104? And with those picks, take Hampton and Johnson. And I think that I would rather have, that Bucky situation, especially with the OC change, does make me just a little bit nervous, but I still think I'd rather have him than the 104. I do like the JT. I'm going to hold on to Bucky in that situation. Rob says, what's the general approach for holding on to young backup QBs in a super flex league? I'm talking JJ McCarthy, Hendon Hooker. Other QBs are Lamar, Derek Carr, and Jameis Winston. We just had the Hendon Hooker conversation, and the difference between him and JJ McCarthy is one of them's young, one of them is not. JJ McCarthy is going to be 22 years old when the season starts. There are probably going to be some drafted quarterbacks who are older than JJ McCarthy. Hendon Hooker is going to be 27. And the other difference is I'm not sure JJ McCarthy is going to be on the bench next year. I kind of expect, if he's healthy, that he's going to be the starter. So he is a must hold, and I would say even a buy right now in Dynasty if you can. Hooker is someone that's kind of a luxury end of the bench guy to hold on to right now. My general rule is if I drafted somebody that I think is going to be good, I'd like to, and they're just a backup quarterback, I'd like to hold them for at least 2 seasons. And then at the end of 2 years, you might not know that they're starting the next year for sure, but you should at least know that they are the future plan. And I'm not sure that we know that yet with Hooker. Okay, we've got a Dynasty rebuilding team, and he has pick 102 and 110 with no running backs or good tight ends. All indication is the 101 will be Genty. How should I pivot at the 102? Jayden, Tua are my best QBs. So the third or fourth team we've seen that no running backs or good tight ends. I think my question is going to be, and for me, draft capital matters a lot more for running backs maybe than it does for other positions. When I don't have any running backs, and I've got the 102, I'm probably looking at what other running back is drafted in round 1. And if there's multiple, then which of the other running backs drafted in round 1, it lands in the best situation. And that's probably the running back that I'm going with. And 110 is a good spot to go get you a tight end. I think there's a couple in this class that can be long-term starters. I was really hopeful that somebody was going to have a Rashee Rice question, because I mentioned the Chris Godwin injury earlier in the show and how my feelings are starting to change about that one. JM asks, is Rashee Rice worth a 3rd-round pick in a 12-team dynasty half PPR? So if you're talking rookie pick, it's yes, for sure. The question is he worth a 1st-round pick? I think most people will say he's definitely worth a 1st-round pick as well. In my January update, I had Xavier Worthy as wide receiver 20 in Dynasty. And I actually had Rashee 18, and I actually had Rice 4 spots lower at wide receiver 22. Like Godwin, the stuff that I'm hearing as people talk about the type of injury that Rice had and the type of recovery that he has coming, I'm feeling less confident that he's going to be a full go. The injury he had wasn't an ACL, it was a PCL. But I guess the recovery timetable is pretty similar, and it's a little bit more unique injury that we haven't seen as often. So I'm a little bit more cautious than most on Rashee Rice. I would still give up a late 1st rookie pick to go get him, but he's not a top 20 dynasty wide receiver, and which is a big change for me. Because while a year ago he was wide receiver 20, for the first couple of weeks of the season, when he was actually delivering on that potential, he moved all the way up into the top 12 for most people. And could be there again, but I'm just not sure it's going to happen immediately. That's all the questions we have from the chat. And I did see Ernest. Thank you for being here, Ernest. I got one more here I'm going to answer, but thanks for answering our questions. I appreciate you guys sending in the questions. And I talked for most of January about, like, if you give us a 5-star review over on Spotify, send that in so that we can see it and we can answer your question. I think that may have got lost a little bit in confusion. So we'll do another one of these in February. If you send us the review and you send us your question to fantasyfootball@cbsi.com, make sure you put Dynasty in the subject, because that's how I search for the emails. We'll do at least one of these per month, the one-man mailbag. Maybe Azer talked about maybe showing up to this one. So maybe one of these days it'll be a 2-man mailbag. Last question from Austin. Tyreek Hill and the 205 or the 105, 12-team, 1 QB, full PPR. And Austin, I think I'll just take the easy escape hatch here. If you're a contender, I would like the Tyreek Hill side. If you're moving into a rebuilding mode, I think this is a pretty good move right here. Tyreek did not come out as a top 12 wide receiver for me in my first run of 2025 rankings. He's over 30 years old. If he's not a redraft top 12 wide receiver, then he's not a dynasty top 24 wide receiver. Being able to get to 105 for that is pretty great. But if you're a contender, then I understand holding on to Tyreek Hill or acquiring him even at that cost, because if he bounces back, he's a league winner. I wanted to thank Thomas for marking the questions in the chat. Thank you to everybody who watched on Twitter and on YouTube. We will talk to you next Tuesday.